Hi, this is my unit on the world's people. This is something that I would use for either a world geography class for my 7th and 8th graders or a world cultures class for my 11th or 12th graders. But for this unit in particular, I'm going to be using it for middle school. So I put the essential question at the bottom, which is what concepts help geographers understand the world's people? I think I initially identified that I wanted to do this unit because kids weren't engaged. They kind of didn't have a lot of connection to it. They weren't, because of the middle school, they weren't having more of a worldly view than maybe my high schoolers. So I really needed to find a way to make some personal connections and a way to just make it a little bit more interactive to keep them engaged. So these are some of the things that I'm doing. So I thought it was important to start with some key reflective points that weren't necessarily objectives about the unit in particular, but about how my students felt about culture and population and government and global connections, which are the four concepts of the world's people which they're going to be learning about. So I thought these questions, which came with one of the unit packets that I have, but the questions like no one is exactly like me, I have many things in common with my members of my family and community, and the last one that you can see there, I think they just give students an opportunity to kind of make some personal connections of how they do have culture in their own life and how, their communities are surrounded by government, population, global connections, which they may not always identify or be aware of. So I think it just kind of gives them an opportunity to discover it on their own without me kind of pointing it out to them. The other thing that I attached is just a small image from a Features of Culture worksheet. I actually got this from some sort of geography Peace Corps handout thing for schools, and I found it really helpful. Not only can students fill it out for themselves, but they can also use it as kind of an interactive guide when they're studying about other cultures. It just goes down through about 30 different features of culture, and so they kind of fill in the blanks, and some they'll have more descriptive answers for than the other, but it kind of allows them to examine and really learn about a culture from these different aspects. So I'll actually attach this in the post when I post this in case anyone else is interested in it. It actually has a lot of really interesting questions on it. This is just a little bit more of a follow-up to the rest of the stuff that I was talking about under my T topic. So I just wanted to clearly emphasize the objectives that are going to go with each of the different concepts of culture. As you can see, the 4 bullet points that I highlight there. And as you start each one of those individual lessons, it always comes with a main idea, objectives, essential questions, and just always clearly stating those. And then usually every Friday is less of a learning activity day for my students, and it's more kind of a reflection on what they learned for the week, a chance to look back at those essential questions and objectives and kind of see what they've learned from their assignments and readings and other interactive lessons, and they can just draw on their own what they're learning from it, and they usually will communicate that to me via like a video journal, a podcast. They can always write it out or do it a written journal. They can do a photo slideshow with descriptions going along with it. It's just their way to communicate how they're understanding the main idea or objective. So I just want to always make sure that I'm re-emphasizing those and make sure that Fridays are set aside for a more reflective study of that. The A is a little bit more obviously about opportunities to have students have a choice, and I specifically highlighted that they were going to have a choice in resource materials and a vocab list. There's a ton of vocab associated with this unit, The World's People, just because they're learning about the general concepts of culture, population, government, and global connections. So they're learning about a lot of foundation vocabulary words, which can be a little bit overwhelming. So I thought about kind of divvying this up and creating a class wiki based on that, and make it a little bit more interactive for the kids and also allow them to have some personal input in that. So hopefully that will ease the burden of all of the vocab associated with this unit. Some of this is a repeat. As you can see under materials, I go back to the fact that I used Fridays as a reflection day where they're revisiting their objectives and main idea, and they can also focus on the vocab in this. There's also an activity that we use called Vocab Expert, where in this case they will be contributing to a class wiki where each student, as they are in charge of a specific vocabulary word from the unit, they can post examples of what that is, then they can also pose questions to the rest of the class to get them to understand what that vocabulary is. So it's kind of like them teaching each other in this kind of format. So the other kids are learning the vocab words without doing some of the reading and reflection that the kid who's the vocab expert is doing. As I spoke about in one of my earlier discussion sections, I do 2 rubrics with my kids a week. They do self-assessments on class participation and then also citizenship qualities. So I thought I would continue to incorporate that for this unit. Not only will they be assessing themselves, but as kids contribute to the class wiki and some of the other interactive activities that they're doing, they will also assess each other on different participation characteristic traits. I will also continue doing teacher feedback with one-on-one. I have small classes because my school is small, so it's nice that I get opportunities to kind of sit down with my kids one-on-one and just check in and ask them about their levels of understanding and their contributions to the class. These are 2 of the rubrics I use. The one on the left is the class participation rubric, and the one on the right is the citizenship rubric. For class participation, some of the things that they evaluate themselves on is level of engagement in class, listening skills, behavioral skills, work habits. Some of the citizenship qualities that they will evaluate themselves on is accountability, consideration, cooperativeness, respect and responsibility, and self-discipline. So it was just to kind of put a little visual to some of the things that I've been discussing. As far as grouping my students, because I have a really small school, sometimes grouping doesn't always provides as an effective measure of grouping as I think if you did it in a larger group. So I thought what I would do is kind of jigsaw my students based on some of the cultural concepts, and then also have them contribute to the class wiki on what I was calling student culture, which really just goes back and revisits the general concepts of culture and also that features of culture where they can kind of contribute their own cultural interests, such as like the way that they dress, how they greet people or how they talk to people, what kind of books do they read, what kind of customs do they or their family practice, and this kind of creates a more personal connection. And you can do the same thing with some of the other lessons in the unit, like population. They can look at their community through census data and see, you know, the types of people that make up their community and relate that to population. And then government, we can look at, you know, global, regional, national, and just kind of look at it that way. So the class wiki, as far as having kids grouped and doing the jigsaw, is I can have them look at the different concepts of culture and make individual contributions as well as contributions based on the lessons. This is kind of just a little bit more of a description of what I was previously talking about. And like I said, I will attach the features of culture worksheets. You can kind of see the elements of culture that I was referring to, but you can also use it in the other units as well, especially for global connections. Sometimes I have them look at articles of clothing that they're wearing and see how they're coming from different parts of the world, and just trying to get them to see that, you know, you may not think about other parts of the world, but that doesn't mean you're not using them in your daily life. So this is just another way to get students to contribute on more of a personal and reflective level. Okay, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but one thing that I didn't talk about is the pre and post reading assessments. Usually before my students start an individual lesson within a unit, I will give them a reading assessment, which I usually post on Edmodo, and I make it up with short answer questions, fill in the blank, multiple choice, true and false. Usually about 10 questions is what I do, so it's not totally overwhelming. And most of the time they're only getting, you know, 1 or 2 right out of 10, but I always tell them that in this case their grade is based on, you know, them giving an honest effort towards completing it and nothing more than that. Their post-reading assessment will take place once they are finished with that individual lesson, and again it's the same exact quiz, 10 questions, and most of the time obviously students are getting, you know, most of the answers right minus 1 or 2, and then we kind of discuss it. What did they remember, what didn't they remember? And we kind of reflect on what we learned from it, and they're usually pretty proud of themselves that they have a vastly different understanding than they did when they first took the assessment. As far as the reflection on objectives in class wiki, I kind of already discussed those, so I will just leave those alone. This last one kind of contributes to the time. I previously in some discussion posts have talked about the assignment chart that I use, since a lot of my kids have a lot of behavioral issues, this kind of allows them to keep themselves on track. What is my expectation for them for the day? And they can kind of provide feedback to me, like, this is what I did get done, this is what I didn't, and then we can meet, obviously, together in some of that one-on-one time and see if they're really working to their potential, where are they having some struggles. I also use Edmodo in my classroom, so sometimes just having kids communicate with me back and forth through that as far as something that they're understanding, something that they have a question about, if they're struggling with a different classmate or something. This is just a way for us to keep tabs on each other if we don't have that class time to sit down and talk. This is just another way that we can continue our communication back and forth. And again, here's just a quick small look at what my assignment chart looks like. It's just the days of the week, what their assignments are for that day, and then what grade they're getting once they've completed it for that day. We'll go back in and grade it. So then usually the following day, or if I'm not on top of it, a day or two after that, they will have a grade reflecting, giving that immediate feedback to what their work effort was for that day and what grade they got out of it as a result. The bottom section is used between both of us for comments as far as how they think they're progressing, if they need a little bit more time on something, and as far as me, I can always provide comments back to them in this way too.